They said weak wolves didn't survive the frontier, and Lyra Vance was about to prove them right. Standing in the training yard with blood on her knees and shame burning her face, she finally understood. In a kingdom that worshipped strength, being powerless meant being invisible. Or worse, a joke. The warriors laughed, the nobles turned away, and Prince Kale, the golden boy she'd foolishly dreamed of, didn't even know her name. But someone else was watching, someone dangerous. Stay until the end to see how the girl everyone ignored became the woman the entire kingdom feared. Drop a like and comment your city below. Let's see where you're watching from. The morning Lyra Vance turned 19, she woke up on the floor of the healer's cottage with dried blood under her fingernails and no memory of how she'd gotten there. Easy now. Old Marin pressed a gnarled hand to her shoulder before she could sit up. You took a nasty fall yesterday. Fall. Right. That was the polite word for it. Lyra's ribs screamed as she shifted against the thin mattress stuffed with straw that poked through the fabric. Through the narrow window, dawn was breaking over Iron Peak, the brutal frontier kingdom carved into the side of a mountain range so hostile that only the strongest wolves survived here. Stone houses clung to cliffsides like stubborn barnacles. Watchtowers stabbed the sky at irregular intervals, their peaks lost in the perpetual mist. And below, past the outer walls that had been rebuilt 3 times in the last decade, the bloodwood forest stretched dark and endless, full of things that would kill you before you could scream for help. This was home. This was hell. And Lyra had never known anything else. How bad? Her voice came out hoarse, like she'd been screaming. Maybe she had. Marin didn't sugarcoat it, she never did. 3 cracked ribs, sprained wrist, concussion, bruising from your shoulder to your hip, that'll take weeks to fade. She handed over a clay cup of something that smelled like moss, dirt, and regret. Drink. You'll live, but you won't like it. Lyra drank. It tasted worse than it smelled, bitter and thick, coating her tongue with an aftertaste of metal and herbs she couldn't name. She gagged, but forced it down. They're saying you challenged Ronan Thorne. Marin's tone was carefully neutral, the way adults spoke when they were trying not to call you an idiot. I didn't challenge anyone. Lyra set down the cup, jaw tight enough to make her temples ache. He challenged me. And you accepted. What was I supposed to do? Walk away in front of everyone? Yes. Marin's expression softened just enough to be more painful than anger. Child, walking away isn't weakness, it's survival. You of all people should know that. But Lyra had tried survival. 19 years of keeping her head down, staying quiet, making herself small enough to slip through the cracks. And what had it gotten her? Nothing. No wolf. No shift. No power. In a kingdom where your worth was measured by the strength of your beast, the sharpness of your claws, the dominance in your growl, she was a blank page in a book full of legends written in blood. Most wolves shifted by 16. The late bloomers managed it by 18, sometimes with help from the pack healers, or the ritual fires held during the autumn equinox. At 19, still human, still powerless, still waiting for something that might never come. She was a joke, a cautionary tale. The girl who proved that sometimes the wolf just didn't come. Ronan's bragging he knocked sense into you, Marin said quietly, returning to the small workbench where she ground herbs with a mortar and pestle. Literally, of course he was. Ronan Thorne, one of Prince Kael's inner circle, all muscle and ego, the kind of wolf who treated the training yard like his personal stage, and every fight like an opportunity to remind everyone of his dominance. Yesterday, he'd announced, loud enough for everyone within earshot to hear, that he wanted to see if the little ghost girl could throw a punch, or if she'd just cry like she did when she was 12 and broke her arm falling off the practice wall. She'd thrown the punch, put her whole body behind it, remembered everything the combat instructor had grudgingly taught her back when he still believed she might shift. Ronan had caught her fist midair, smiled, and thrown her into a stone wall so hard the impact cracked the mortar. The crowd had laughed. Some had cheered. Prince Kael, standing near the weapons rack with a training sword balanced on his shoulder, had smiled, not cruel, just amused, like watching a rabbit try to fight a hawk, entertaining in its futility. He'd even clapped twice before turning back to his conversation with a copper-haired warrior whose name Lyra didn't know. And Lyra, pinned against the wall with Ronan's hand around her throat and her vision going spotty, had realized something sharp and cold that settled in her chest like a stone. Nobody was going to save her. Not here, not ever. This was the world, and she was never going to be strong enough for it. Where's my journal? She tried to stand. The world tilted sideways. On the table. And sit down before you pass out again and crack your skull on my good floor. Lyra ignored her, limping on a twisted ankle she hadn't noticed yesterday to the small wooden table where her journal sat. Spine cracked from being dropped too many times. Pages warped from the river water it had fallen into last winter when she'd been running from a group of younger wolves who thought it was funny to see if the wolfless girl could swim. She'd kept this journal since she was 12, filled it with thoughts she couldn't say out loud, feelings that would get her laughed at or worse, observations about people who would never notice her noticing them. Lately, most of it was about Kael, Prince Kael Ardent, second son of the late King Aldrich and older brother to the current ruler King Draven. Kael was everything the kingdom loved. Charming, golden-haired like wheat in summer sun, quick with a smile and a joke that made even the grumpiest warriors crack. He fought in the tournaments with a graceful brutality that made it look easy, flirted with the noble daughters without ever committing to anyone, and treated life like a game he was born to win. He was warm where his brother was ice, approachable where Draven was a storm you avoided, beloved where the king was merely feared, and completely, utterly, laughably out of Lyra's reach. Still, she'd written his name 100 times in this journal, maybe 200, imagined conversations that would never happen, dreamed of a world where someone like him noticed someone like her, not for pity or amusement, but because he actually saw something worth noticing. Pathetic didn't even begin to cover it. She flipped to a blank page, one of the few remaining, and scrawled in handwriting that shook, "I am so tired of being nothing." "You're not nothing," Marin's voice was sharp enough to cut. Lyra didn't look up. "You don't have to lie to make me feel better." "I'm not." The old woman moved closer, her steps heavy with age and too many years carrying other people's pain. "Listen to me, girl. This kingdom measures strength in claws and fangs, in how loud you can roar and how many bones you can break. But that's not the only kind of power in this world. You're smart. Smarter than half the wolves who mock you. You see things others don't. You survive when you shouldn't. That counts for something. Surviving isn't living. It is when you're surrounded by wolves who'd eat you alive if they thought they could get away with it." Lyra closed the journal, running her thumb over the cracked leather cover. What if I don't want to just survive anymore? What if I want more? Marin was quiet for a long moment. Outside, someone shouted orders at the morning patrol. Dogs barked. Life continued like yesterday hadn't happened. Then you'd better be ready for what comes next, because wanting more in a place like this, that's when people get hurt. I'm already hurt. Not like you will be. Lyra returned to the pack house 2 days later, ribs still aching, pride still shattered and scattered like dropped glass. The pack house sat near the center of Iron Peak, a massive stone structure that had been expanded haphazardly over generations until it was more maze than building. This was where unmated wolves lived, trained, ate, slept, and tore each other apart in the name of hierarchy and dominance, and all the other things that supposedly kept society functioning. It was loud, brutal, and exhausting in ways that had nothing to do with physical labor. She hated it with a passion that sometimes scared her. But she had nowhere else to go. Orphaned at 10 when a Bloodwood raid killed her parents and 17 others, she'd been shuffled into the system, given a narrow bed in the female dormitory, a job in the kitchens that paid barely enough to cover her share of food costs, and a future that looked like more of the same until she either died or got lucky enough to marry someone who didn't care that she was wolfless. The main hall was packed when she arrived, earlier than expected because she'd walked fast to avoid running into anyone on the street. Dinner wasn't for another hour, but the space was already chaotic. Wolves sparring in the corner near the weapons rack, others drinking at tables that had been carved with initials and crude drawings by generations of bored residents. Someone singing off-key near the massive fireplace that was large enough to roast a whole deer. Lyra slipped along the wall, keeping to the shadows, hoping to reach the stairs in her room unnoticed. "Well, look who's back from the dead." She froze. Ronan sat near the hearth, boots propped on a table, surrounded by his usual group of sycophants who laughed at everything he said and agreed with every opinion he expressed. He grinned when he saw her, all teeth, no warmth. "How's the ribs, little ghost?" Lyra didn't answer. She kept walking, eyes fixed on the stairs at the far end of the hall. "Oh, don't be like that." He stood, chair scraping against stone, and moved to block her path. 6 feet of muscle and arrogance. "I thought we were bonding the other day. Really connecting, you know?" "Move. Make me." His grin widened. "Oh, wait. You can't." The room went quiet. Not completely. The fire still crackled. Someone still sang in the corner. But enough. Enough that people turned to watch. Wolves loved a spectacle, especially when it involved someone getting humiliated. Lyra met his eyes, pale gray, utterly empty of anything resembling kindness or depth. "I'm not doing this again." "Doing what? Getting your ass kicked?" He leaned closer, close enough that she could smell the ale on his breath. "Face it, Lyra. You don't belong here. You're not a wolf. You're barely human. You're just taking up space, breathing air that someone stronger could be using." Something inside her cracked. Not broke. Not yet. But cracked. Like ice under pressure, that moment before it gives way completely. "You're right," she said quietly. Ronan blinked. Clearly not the response he'd expected. "What?" "You're right. I'm not like you." She stepped closer, ignoring the sharp pain in her ribs, the way her hands wanted to shake. "I don't have a wolf. I don't have power. I don't have claws or strength or any of the things this kingdom values." He smirked, sensing victory. Finally, she gets it. "But you know what else I don't have?" Her voice dropped, steadier now. "Your desperate, pathetic need for everyone to like me. I don't perform for scraps of attention. I don't bully people weaker than me to feel strong because I'm so empty inside that I need constant validation, and I sure as hell don't need a crowd of yes men to tell me I matter." The smirk faltered. "So yeah," Lyra said, each word deliberate. "You're stronger, faster, more powerful. Congratulations. You're still the saddest, most insecure person in this room, and everyone here knows it, even if they're too scared to say it." She walked past him. No one stopped her. No one even breathed loudly. She made it to the stairs, up 2 flights, down the corridor to her room before her legs started shaking. She locked the door, slid down it to sit on the floor, and pressed her forehead to her knees. Her heart was hammering, her ribs ached, and she felt alive. Terrified, but alive. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The dormitory was too loud, always was, with 15 other girls crammed into rooms designed for 10. Someone snored. Someone else cried quietly, the way they did every night. The girl in the next bed over was writing a letter by candlelight, probably to the boy she was hoping would choose her as a mate. Lyra gave up around midnight, slipped out of bed fully dressed. She'd learned to sleep in her clothes years ago, grabbed her journal, and crept down the back stairs to the courtyard. The night air was sharp and cold, biting through her thin jacket. She found her usual spot, a stone bench near the edge of the grounds, positioned where you could see over the wall to the valley below. From here, Iron Peak almost looked beautiful. The lights from windows and torches glittered against the dark stone. The mountains loomed like sleeping giants. If you ignored the bloodstains in the training yard and the fear that clung to every corner, you could almost pretend this was a place worth living in. She opened her journal to a fresh page and started writing by moonlight. "I don't know what I'm waiting for anymore. I used to think if I stayed quiet enough, small enough, invisible enough, maybe I'd be safe. Maybe someone would notice me in a good way, see past the fact that I'm wolfless and see, I don't know, something worth caring about. I used to think maybe Kael would—" She stopped, stared at the words, then crossed them out so violently the pen tore through the paper. "That's stupid. He doesn't know I exist, and even if he did, why would he care? I'm nobody. Just another face in the crowd. Just another girl who'll work in the kitchens until I'm too old to stand, then die and be forgotten within a week. Maybe less. Sometimes I wonder what the point is. If this is all there is. If I should just— You write a lot." Lyra nearly fell off the bench, journal flying from her hands. Her heart stopped, restarted, tried to climb out of her throat. A figure stood at the edge of the courtyard, tall, broad-shouldered, completely still in a way that predators were still when they were deciding whether to strike. For one wild, irrational second, her heart leapt with hope. Then he stepped into the moonlight, and her stomach dropped like a stone in deep water. King Draven. Not Kael. Never Kael. Draven Ardent was everything his younger brother wasn't. Where Kael was golden and warm like summer, Draven was cold, sharp, unreadable, winter in human form. He ruled Iron Peak with an iron fist and zero tolerance for weakness, incompetence, or excuses. He didn't smile, didn't joke, didn't waste time on anything that wasn't strategy, survival, or war. People whispered that he'd killed his first enemy at 14, led his first battle at 16, and took the throne at 22 when their father died and hadn't shown mercy since. And he definitely didn't talk to kitchen girls who couldn't shift and had no business being anywhere near the royal family. Your Majesty. Lyra scrambled to her feet, nearly tripping over the bench, and tried to curtsy while simultaneously picking up her journal. She failed at both. I'm sorry, I'll leave. Relax. His voice was low, rough like gravel, the kind of voice that gave orders and expected them to be followed. You're not in trouble. She didn't relax. Nobody relaxed around Draven. That was rule number 1 of survival in Iron Peak. He moved closer, boots silent on stone, and she noticed things she'd never been close enough to see before. The scar along his jaw that disappeared into his collar, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, the way his eyes, pale blue, like winter ice, seemed to see straight through skin and bone to whatever truth you were trying to hide. She clutched her journal to her chest like armor. You handled Ronan well today, he said. She blinked. You saw that? I see most things that happen in my kingdom. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. It was terrifying. How much had he seen? What else did he know? He's an idiot, Draven continued, almost conversational, though nothing about him was casual. Overcompensating for inadequacy with aggression. Typical. He paused. But he's not wrong about one thing. Lyra's chest tightened. Her ribs ached. What? You don't belong here. The words hit like a physical blow. She actually stepped back. Not because you're weak, he added, before she could spiral completely. His eyes never left hers. Because you're wasted here. Your mind is sharp. Your observations are accurate. You see the cracks in the system that everyone else ignores because addressing them would require actual thought. She stared at him. I don't understand. You will. He turned to leave, movement fluid and precise, then paused. And Lyra? She'd never heard him say her name before. Didn't know he knew it. Stop waiting for someone to choose you, he said quietly, voice carrying in the night air. Choose yourself. Decide what you want and take it. This world doesn't give anything to people who ask nicely. Then he was gone, disappearing into shadow like he'd never been there at all. Lyra stood there, heart pounding against her cracked ribs, journal shaking in her hands, and wondered what the hell just happened, and why the King of Iron Peak knew her name. The next week passed in a blur of kitchen work and avoidance. Lyra kept her head down, chopped vegetables until her hands cramped, avoided Ronan and his friends, and tried desperately not to think about Draven's words. Choose yourself. Easy for him to say. He was a king, an alpha, the most powerful wolf in the kingdom. He could choose anything, anyone, any path he wanted. But her? What did she have to choose from? Poverty or destitution? Loneliness or isolation? A life of serving others or a life of being forgotten? She was still just Lyra, wolfless, powerless, stuck. It was Marin who brought the news on a gray afternoon while Lyra was grinding herbs for the evening stew. There's a gathering tomorrow night, the old woman said, setting down a basket of dried lavender. The prince is hosting. Lyra looked up from the mortar and pestle. Kael? Who else? Think King Draven hosts parties? Marin's tone was dry as dust. He's calling it a celebration of unity and pack bonding or some flowery nonsense. Really, it's just an excuse for him to drink expensive wine, flirt with every unmarried woman in the kingdom, and remind everyone how charming he is. Sounds about right. Lyra went back to grinding, rosemary and thyme, the familiar scent filling her nose. He's invited everyone, even the lower ranks, even kitchen staff. Marin's eyes narrowed. Don't get ideas. Too late. The idea was already forming, taking root like a weed in concrete. That night, Lyra stood in front of the cracked mirror in the dormitory washroom, the only mirror available to the lower ranks, and tried to see what Kael might see if he ever looked at her. Actually looked, not just past her. Brown hair, tangled and unremarkable, the kind of mousy brown that didn't catch light. Brown eyes, too wide, too worried, set in a face that wasn't ugly but wasn't beautiful either. Just plain, forgettable, the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. She sighed, watching her breath fog the glass. Then she made a decision. She returned to her room, pulled out the trunk under her bed that held everything she owned, and dug through folded clothes and spare blankets until she found it. The one nice dress she owned. Simple blue cotton, not silk or anything fancy, but clean and fitted enough to look intentional. She'd traded 2 weeks' wages for it last year, thinking maybe, someday, she'd need it for something important. Tomorrow night, she'd go to Kael's gathering. She'd wear the dress. She'd stand in that hall with all the wolves who had everything she didn't. And maybe, just maybe, someone would finally see her. Someone who mattered. She had no idea how badly that wish would go wrong. She had no idea that someone had already been watching her for years. And she had no idea that tomorrow night would shatter everything she thought she knew about herself, about power, and about who she was supposed to be. The gathering was everything Lyra expected, and somehow worse. The Great Hall had been transformed, banners in the royal colors hanging from the rafters, tables groaning under the weight of roasted meats and fresh bread and fruits that must have cost a fortune to import. Music drifted through the air, played by musicians who actually knew what they were doing. Wolves packed the space, dressed in their finest, laughing and drinking and basking in the golden glow of Prince Kael's attention like flowers turning toward the sun. And Kael? He was in his element, thriving. He moved through the crowd like liquid sunlight, charming everyone he touched. A joke here that made a group of warriors laugh, a compliment there that made a noble daughter blush, a hand on a shoulder, a wink across the room. He wore confidence like other people wore clothes, natural, easy, impossible to separate from who he was. Lyra watched from the shadows near the back wall, too nervous to move deeper into the crowd, too proud to leave. The blue dress felt suddenly inadequate. Wrong. She tugged at the sleeves. "You actually came." She turned. A girl she vaguely recognized from the pack house, Senna, worked in the laundry, stood beside her, eyebrows raised in genuine surprise. "Why wouldn't I?" Lyra said, defensive. "Because you're you." Senna wasn't being mean, just factual, stating the obvious. "This isn't really your scene. All these people, all this noise. Maybe I'm trying something new." Senna snorted, took a drink from her cup. "Good luck with that. Fair warning, the noble girls have been circling Kael like sharks all night. You're competing with some serious bloodlines. I'm not competing with anyone." "Right. That's why you wore your nice dress and did something to your hair." Lyra touched her hair self-consciously. She'd braided it, tried to make it look intentional. "Is it bad?" "It's fine. Better than fine." Senna's expression softened. "Look, I'm not trying to be cruel. I just don't want you to get hurt. These gatherings, they're not for people like us. We're set dressing, background. They don't see us. Maybe I want to be seen. And maybe wanting doesn't make it happen." Senna disappeared into the crowd, leaving Lyra alone with her thoughts and her inadequate dress. An hour passed, then 2. Lyra nursed a single cup of wine that tasted expensive and made her head feel light. She watched Kael laugh with a blonde noble girl who looked like she'd stepped out of a painting. Beautiful, confident, powerful, everything Lyra wasn't and would never be. The girl touched Kael's arm. He smiled. They looked perfect together. Of course they did. Lyra was about to leave, to slip out before anyone noticed she'd wasted the evening standing against a wall like furniture when someone tapped her shoulder. She turned. A young wolf she didn't recognize, maybe 16 with sandy hair and freckles, grinned at her. "You're Lyra, right? From the kitchens?" Her heart jumped. "Yes?" "Prince Kael wants to see you." The world stopped. The music faded. Everything narrowed to those 6 words. "What?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "He's waiting in the East Garden, alone." The boy's grin widened, conspiratorial. He said it's important. Said to bring you to him specifically. Didn't want to make a big deal out of it in front of everyone. Lyra's pulse roared in her ears so loud she could barely think. He wants to see me? Are you sure? Positive. Come on, I'll show you. She followed him through a side door, mind racing. Why would Kyle want to see her? Had he noticed her? Had someone told him something? Was this real? They moved down a corridor, torches flickering, then out into the garden. The music faded behind them. The air was cool, sharp with the scent of night-blooming flowers that only grew in the royal gardens, carefully tended and expensive. He's just through there, the boy said, pointing to a shadowed alcove near the far wall where vines grew thick and wild. He said to wear this. He pulled something from his pocket, a strip of black silk, soft and expensive. Lyra stared at it. What is this? A blindfold. The boy's grin turned knowing. He wants it to be a surprise, something romantic, I think. He does this sometimes with girls he really likes, makes it special, you know? Every instinct screamed at her to walk away. This was strange. This was wrong. This wasn't how things like this happened. But God, she'd waited so long for this. For anything. For someone to notice her, to choose her, to see something in her worth caring about. And if Kyle wanted to make it special, romantic, memorable, who was she to question it? Her hands shook as she tied the blindfold over her eyes. The world went dark. She heard the boy's footsteps retreat, heard rustling leaves, felt the night air on her skin suddenly too cold. Then silence. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, closer. She felt a presence, close, too close. Her breath hitched. Kyle? She whispered. No answer. Then hands, large, rough, calloused from sword work and labor, cupped her face with a gentleness that didn't match their roughness. And someone kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't the sweet, tentative first kiss she'd imagined 1,000 times in her journal. It was raw, desperate, intense like drowning and breathing at the same time. Heat flooded her body, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her already broken ribs. The hands tightened on her face, angling her head, deepening the kiss until she couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but feel. It was everything. It was terrifying. It was perfect. When he finally pulled back, she gasped for air. Kyle, she started, reaching up to remove the blindfold. Shh. The voice was low, hoarse, strained, unfamiliar. Before she could react, before she could process, the hands were gone. Footsteps retreated fast, almost running. Lyra tore off the blindfold, spinning around, eyes adjusting to the moonlight. The garden was empty. She stood there, pulse racing, lips still burning, mind trying to make sense of what just happened. She searched the shadows, called out softly. Hello? Nothing. She was alone. She touched her lips, still feeling the pressure, the heat. That had been real. That had definitely, absolutely been real. But if it was Kyle, why did the voice sound wrong? Why did he run? Unless it wasn't Kyle at all. The thought settled cold in her stomach. She stood in that garden for a long time, trying to understand, trying to make the pieces fit. But they wouldn't. They refused. Finally, she walked back inside, through the corridor, back to the Great Hall. The party was still going. Kyle was still there, laughing with the same blonde girl, looking like he'd never left the room, looking like he had no idea Lyra existed at all. She left the gathering, walked back to the pack house, through empty streets, climbed the stairs to the dormitory, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling until dawn. Someone had kissed her tonight. Someone had held her face like she mattered, kissed her like she was drowning and they needed her to breathe. But it wasn't Kyle, and she had no idea who it was, or why they'd done it, or why her lips still burned with the memory of hands that felt nothing like the prince's should have felt. Rougher, stronger, more desperate. Like someone who'd been holding back for a very long time. Sleep didn't come that night. Lyra lay in the narrow bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling while her mind replayed the kiss over and over until the memory felt more real than the present moment. The hands, the roughness of calluses against her skin, the desperate intensity that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with something darker, hungrier. The voice, low and strained and definitely not Kyle's smooth tenor. By morning, she'd convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing, a trick of wine and wishful thinking. The boy with freckles had probably been playing a cruel joke, and she'd stood alone in that garden kissing the air like a fool. Except her lips still felt bruised, and her heart still raced when she thought about it. She dragged herself to the kitchens before dawn, hoping work would quiet her thoughts. It didn't. She burned the porridge, cut her finger slicing bread, and dropped an entire tray of cups that shattered across the stone floor. "What's wrong with you today?" asked Mina, the head cook, a woman built like a boulder with a voice to match. "Nothing, sorry." "Nothing doesn't make you useless. You sick?" "No." "Pregnant?" "What? No," Mina grunted, unconvinced. "Then get your head straight or get out of my kitchen." Lyra swept up the broken pottery, fingers still shaking, and tried to focus. She failed. By midday, word had spread through the pack house about the gathering. Not about Lyra, nobody cared about her, but about Kyle. Apparently he'd spent most of the night with Lady Seraphina Blackwood, the blonde noble with perfect teeth and a bloodline that traced back 6 generations of alpha wolves. Rumor said he'd walked her home personally, stayed until dawn, emerged looking satisfied. "They're saying he'll choose her," Senna whispered during the lunch service, ladling soup into wooden bowls. "Make it official at the next moon gathering." Lyra's stomach twisted. "Good for him. You don't care?" "Why would I?" Senna gave her a look that said she wasn't fooled. "Because you wore your nice dress last night and stood in the corner watching him like he was the last star in the sky." "I wasn't. Everyone saw you, Lyra. It's fine. Half the girls here have done the same thing. He's pretty, he's charming, he's a prince. It's basically required to have a crush on him at some point." She lowered her voice. "But he's also never going to choose someone like us. Better to accept it now than torture yourself." Lyra didn't respond. What could she say? That she'd been kissed in a dark garden by someone who wasn't the prince? That she couldn't stop thinking about hands that had touched her like she was precious and breakable and desperately wanted? She kept her mouth shut and served soup. That afternoon, everything changed. She was hauling water from the well in the courtyard when she heard her name. "Lyra!" She turned, bucket sloshing. The freckled boy from last night jogged toward her, grinning like they were old friends. "Hey, I was looking for you." Her pulse jumped. "Why?" "Prince Kael wants to see you again." The bucket slipped from her hands, water spilling across the stones. "He what?" "Wants to see you. Today. This afternoon." The boy leaned closer, conspiratorial. "I think he really likes you. He couldn't stop talking about you after last night." "That's impossible." "Why? You're pretty enough. Different from the noble girls." He said that specifically. Said, "You're refreshing." Lyra's mind spun. Kael had spent the night with Seraphina. Everyone said so. Why would he ask for her now? Unless last night had been real. Unless he'd been in that garden, blindfolded her for privacy, kissed her, and now wanted to see her again. Her heart did something complicated and painful. "Where?" she managed. "The library, 2nd floor of the West Wing. He'll meet you there in an hour." The boy winked. "Don't keep him waiting." He disappeared before she could ask more questions. Lyra stood there, dripping and confused, while her thoughts tried to organize themselves into something coherent. This didn't make sense. None of it made sense. But what if it was real? What if Kael had actually noticed her, chosen her, wanted her? She abandoned the bucket and ran. The library occupied the 2nd floor of the palace's West Wing, a massive room filled with books nobody read and furniture too expensive to sit on. Lyra had been inside exactly once, 3 years ago, when she delivered tea to a visiting scholar who'd looked at her like she was tracking mud across sacred ground. She arrived early, heart hammering, palms sweating. The space was empty. Shelves stretching toward a vaulted ceiling, afternoon light filtering through tall windows, dust motes dancing in the air. She waited. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. She was about to leave, convinced this was another joke, when footsteps echoed in the hallway. The door opened. Kael walked in, golden and radiant, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than Lyra earned in a year. He smiled when he saw her, that easy, charming smile that made people forget their own names. "Lyra, you came." She couldn't breathe. You asked for me." "I did." He moved closer, graceful and confident. I've been watching you, for a while now. You have? Of course. You're different from the others. Quieter, more genuine. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture felt practiced. I like that. This was happening. This was actually happening. I don't understand, she whispered. Why me? Why not you? He tilted his head, studying her. You think I only care about bloodlines and politics? That's exhausting. Sometimes I want something real. And I'm real? You could be. His hand lingered near her face. If you wanted to be. Every alarm in her head was screaming. This felt wrong, too smooth, too perfect. But she'd wanted this for so long, dreamed of this exact moment, and here it was, happening real. Last night, she started, in the garden, was perfect. He stepped even closer. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about you. But his eyes were wrong, too calculated, too aware of exactly what to say. Kyle, The door burst open. A man strode in, one of the royal guards, expression urgent. Your Highness, forgive the interruption. The king needs you immediately. Council meeting's been moved up. Kyle's jaw tightened. Now? Now. He turned back to Lyra, squeezed her hand. I'm sorry, duty calls, but meet me tonight. Same garden as before. We'll finish this conversation properly. He left before she could answer, boots clicking on marble, the guard trailing behind. Lyra stood alone in the library, hand tingling where he'd touched it, mind reeling. Kyle wanted to see her tonight, had been thinking about her, called her genuine. This was everything she'd wanted. So why did it feel like a trap? She left the library in a daze, descended the stairs, and nearly collided with someone in the hallway. Careful. She looked up. King Draven stood there, dressed in black, face unreadable. He studied her with those pale eyes that saw too much. You were in the library, he said. Not a question. Yes, I was, she fumbled for an explanation. Delivering something. To my brother. Heat flooded her face. How did you? I told you. I see most things. His expression didn't change. Be careful, Lyra. Of what? Of wanting something so badly you ignore what it costs. Before she could respond, he walked past her, footsteps echoing down the hall, leaving her with more questions than answers. That evening, Lyra returned to her room to find Senna waiting. Where were you? Senna demanded. Mina's been looking for you for hours. You missed the entire dinner service. Lyra stopped. What could she say? I got delayed. Delayed where? Senna's eyes narrowed. And why do you look like that? Like what? Like someone who just got kissed and is trying very hard not to smile about it. Lyra's face betrayed her. Senna's mouth fell open. No way. Who? When? Tell me everything right now. I can't. Why not? Because I don't know if it's real. But that night, standing in the same garden where she'd been kissed by a stranger, waiting for Kyle to arrive, she wanted desperately for it to be real. He appeared right on time, stepping from the shadows like something out of the romance novels the noble girls read. You waited, he said, sounding pleased. You asked me to. I did. He moved closer, and in the moonlight he looked perfect, too perfect. I want to know you, Lyra. Really know you. Not the version you show everyone else. There's not much to know. I doubt that. He reached for her hand. Tell me something true. Something you've never told anyone. The request felt intimate, dangerous. She hesitated. I'm afraid, she said finally. All the time. Afraid I'll never be enough. Never matter. Never be anything more than what I am right now. His thumb traced circles on her palm. You matter to me. Why? Because you're honest. Because you don't pretend. He pulled her closer. Because when I kiss you, you don't calculate what you'll get out of it. You just feel. And then he kissed her. It was different from the garden kiss. Softer. More controlled. Pleasant but not desperate. Warm but not burning. Wrong. The realization hit like cold water. This wasn't the same. The hands were different, smaller, smoother. The intensity was missing. This felt like performance, like he was going through motions he'd practiced. She pulled back. Kale, what's wrong? This isn't... She stopped. How could she explain without sounding insane? Last night in the garden, that was you, right? Something flickered across his face. Of course it was me. Who else would it be? I don't know. It just felt different. Different how? She couldn't answer. Couldn't explain the wrongness without admitting she'd felt something real with the stranger, something she didn't feel now. Never mind, she said quietly. I'm probably just nervous. Don't be. He smiled, charming and practiced. I want you to trust me, Lyra. Can you do that? She wanted to, desperately wanted to, but something in her chest was screaming that this was wrong, all of it, and she was ignoring every instinct she had. I'll try, she whispered. Over the next 2 weeks, Kyle sought her out regularly. Secret meetings in the library, walks in the garden at dusk, stolen conversations when no one was watching. He asked about her past, her dreams, her thoughts. He listened, or seemed to, and responded with exactly the right words at exactly the right moments. He never touched her beyond holding hands, never kissed her again. And somehow, that made her more uncertain, not less. He's courting you, Senna said one night, eyes wide with disbelief. Prince Kyle is actually courting you. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. Everyone's talking about it. The prince and the kitchen girl. It's like something out of a story. It did feel like a story. The wrong kind. The kind where something terrible was building beneath the surface. But Lyra ignored the feeling. She smiled when Kyle smiled, laughed at his jokes, told herself this was what she'd always wanted. She didn't notice the way Draven watched from windows and shadows, expression carved from stone. She didn't notice the jealous glances from the noble girls who'd lost Kyle's attention. She didn't notice the trap closing around her until it was too late. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Lyra was crossing the courtyard when 3 girls blocked her path. She recognized 2 of them, Lady Seraphina and her closest friend, Evangeline. The third was a stranger with sharp features and sharper eyes. Can I help you? Lyra asked, keeping her voice neutral. We need to talk, Seraphina said. Her tone was pleasant. Her expression was murder. About Kyle. I don't think he's using you. Evangeline cut her off. You know that, right? Lyra's stomach dropped. What? Kyle. He's using you to make me jealous. Seraphina stepped closer, close enough that Lyra could smell expensive perfume. It's a game he plays. Picks some nobody, lavishes attention on them for a few weeks, then drops them the second I pay attention to him again. That's not... It is. Ask anyone. He did the same thing with a merchant's daughter last year, and a visiting scholar's assistant the year before. You're not special, sweetie. You're just convenient. The words landed like punches. I don't believe you, Lyra said, but her voice shook. Believe what you want. Seraphina shrugged. But when he gets bored and moves on, don't say I didn't warn you. And maybe next time, stay in your lane. You're embarrassing yourself. They walked away laughing. Lyra stood there, frozen, while doubt poisoned everything. Was it true? Was she just a pawn in some elaborate game between Kyle and his noble lovers? No, it couldn't be. He'd been too sincere, too interested. Except he had been perfect. Too perfect. Every word calibrated, every gesture practiced. She needed to know. That night, she went to the garden early and hid behind a hedge near the entrance. If Kyle was using her, if this was a game, maybe she'd overhear something that proved it. She waited. 15 minutes later, voices approached. Getting attached, someone said. Male, familiar, Ronan. That's the point. Kale's voice, warm and amused. The longer she believes it, the better it works. Lyra's blood went cold. And Seraphina's buying it? Ronan asked. Completely. She's furious. Exactly what I wanted. Kale laughed. I give it another week before she's begging me to stop playing games and commit to her properly. And the kitchen girl? What about her? What happens when you're done? Silence. Then she goes back to the kitchens, where she belongs. Lyra pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from making a sound. Cold, Ronan said, but he sounded impressed. Even for you. It's not cold, it's practical. She's nobody, Ronan. This doesn't hurt her. She should be grateful I paid attention at all. Footsteps moved closer to where Lyra hid. Besides, she's so desperate for affection, she'll believe anything I tell her. It's almost too easy. They walked past her hiding spot, still talking, unaware. Lyra stayed frozen until their voices faded. Then she ran. She ran through the gardens, past the palace, down streets she barely saw, until she reached the pack house. She climbed the stairs to the roof, a place nobody went except during fires, and finally let herself break. Not crying. She was too angry to cry. She'd been right. It had been a trap, a game. She was the joke, and everyone had been laughing. The kiss in the garden, that first desperate kiss, that hadn't been Kyle. It couldn't have been. He'd never touched her with that intensity, that hunger. So who? She sat on the cold stone, knees pulled to her chest, and tried to piece together what was real. Someone had kissed her. Someone had watched her, known she'd be in that garden, arranged the whole thing. Someone who wasn't Kyle. Draven's words echoed in her head. I see most things. No, that was impossible. The king didn't play games, didn't manipulate, didn't care about kitchen girls, except he'd known her name, warned her to be careful, watched her with eyes that saw too much. What if? The sound of footsteps on the stairs made her freeze. She turned. King Draven emerged onto the roof, moonlight catching the silver in his hair. He didn't look surprised to find her there. You ran, he said simply. How did you? She stopped. Of course he knew. He saw everything. He moved closer, silent as a predator. You heard. Not a question, a statement. You knew, she said, voice flat. You knew what Kyle was doing. Yes. And you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me? She wanted to say yes, but he was right. She wouldn't have. She'd been too desperate, too hopeful. Why are you here? She asked. Because you're about to do something stupid, and I'd prefer you didn't. Like what? Like confronting my brother, like making a scene, like getting yourself hurt worse than you already are. She stood, anger surging. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept it? Pretend I don't know I'm a joke? No. His voice was steel. You're supposed to be smarter than him, stronger than the game he's playing. How? He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the muscle working in his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. By choosing something real instead of a pretty lie. Her breath caught. What does that mean? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face with the same rough hands that had held her in the garden 2 weeks ago. The same calluses, the same gentleness hiding desperate strength. It was you, she breathed. Yes. Why? Because I've watched you survive in a world that wants to break you, and you refuse to let it. Because you're stronger than anyone here realizes, including yourself. Because... He stopped, jaw clenched. Because what? Because I'm selfish, and I wanted one moment where you looked at me the way you looked at him. The confession was raw, unpolished, nothing like Kyle's smooth words. It was real. You could have told me, she whispered. And said what? That the king wants the powerless kitchen girl? You would have thought I was mocking you. He wasn't wrong. So you let me believe it was Kyle. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. His thumb traced her jaw. But I can't watch him use you anymore. I won't. Why do you care? Because you matter. His eyes held hers, pale and intense. You've always mattered. To me. The words cracked something open in her chest. Your brother will destroy me, she said, when he finds out. When people find out. Let him try. Draven... He kissed her. Not like the garden. That had been desperate restraint breaking. This was deliberate, claiming, a promise and a warning wrapped together. His hand slid into her hair, tilted her head back, and she stopped thinking entirely. This was what the kiss should have felt like. This burning, this certainty, this feeling like the world was tilting and she didn't care if she fell. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Draven's expression was almost dangerous. Choose, he said quietly. The lie that makes you comfortable, or the truth that terrifies you? Before she could answer, shouts erupted from below. They pulled apart, looked over the edge of the roof. The courtyard was chaos, wolves running, voices raised, someone screaming. "What's happening?" Lyra asked. Draven's expression went cold. "Bloodwood raid. They've breached the eastern wall." He moved toward the stairs, but Lyra grabbed his arm. "Wait. Stay here. Lock yourself in the pack house. Don't leave until—" "I'm not hiding." "Lyra, I'm not." She lifted her chin. "I'm tired of hiding, of being powerless. If this kingdom is under attack, I'm not going to sit in a corner and wait." Something fierce flashed in his eyes. Pride, maybe. Or recognition. "Then stay close," he said, "and don't do anything stupid." They ran down the stairs together, into the chaos, into the fire, into the night where everything Lyra thought she knew was about to burn. The eastern wall was burning. Lyra had never seen fire like this. Not the controlled flames of hearths or torches, but wild, hungry fire that ate stone and wood with equal greed. Smoke choked the air, turning moonlight into something red and wrong. Wolves were everywhere, some shifted, some still human, all armed, all fighting against shapes that poured through the breach in the wall like water through a broken dam. Bloodwood raiders. She'd heard stories her whole life. Savage, they said, ruthless. They came from the deep forest where things grew twisted and dark, where the trees had thorns like knives and the ground itself wanted you dead. They raided for supplies, for captives, for the pure violence of it. Draven moved through the chaos like he was born for it, shouting orders that cut through the screaming. Warriors responded instantly, forming defensive lines, protecting the civilians trying to flee toward the inner keep. "Get to the pack house," he told Lyra, gripping her shoulders. "Now." "I can help." "You can die." His eyes were hard. "You have no wolf, no weapons, no training for this. Go." A raider burst from the smoke, huge, scarred, wielding an axe that looked like it had tasted too much blood. He swung at Draven's back. Lyra screamed a warning. Draven spun, caught the axe handle mid-swing, and broke the man's arm with a sound like snapping branches. The raider howled. Draven threw him into two others, all three crashing to the ground. He turned back to Lyra, breathing hard. "I said go." She ran. Not to the pack house. She couldn't. The path was blocked by fire and fighting bodies. Instead, she ran toward the training yard, where she knew there were water barrels for putting out fires. If she could help with the flames, maybe she could be useful. Maybe she could— Someone grabbed her from behind, an arm locked around her throat. She clawed at it, couldn't breathe, kicked backward and hit nothing. "Got one," a voice rasped in her ear. Male, rough. "Little thing too, she'll fetch a price." Panic exploded in her chest. She thrashed, fought, tried to scream, but the arm was too tight. Black spots danced in her vision, then the pressure released. She collapsed, gasping, looked up through streaming eyes to see Ronan standing over the raider's unconscious body, fist still raised. "Get up," he said, not looking at her. "Move." She stumbled to her feet. "Ronan, save it." He scanned the courtyard, jaw tight. "This whole sector's compromised. We need to fall back to the inner walls." "I was trying to get to the water barrels." "Forget the barrels. The wall's lost. If you want to help, stop being a liability and move." He grabbed her wrist and pulled her through the chaos. She ran beside him, feet slipping on blood-slicked stones, lungs burning from smoke. Around them, Iron Peak was tearing itself apart. Buildings burned. People screamed. The raiders fought with weapons that looked homemade and vicious, spiked clubs, barbed nets, blades that curved wrong. They were halfway to the inner courtyard when she heard her name. "Lyra!" She turned. Senna was trapped against a wall by two raiders, bleeding from a cut on her forehead, holding a kitchen knife that shook in her hand. Ronan kept running. "Don't!" Lyra ripped her wrist free and sprinted towards Senna. One of the raiders swung a club at Senna's head. She ducked, too slow. The club grazed her temple and she went down hard. Lyra grabbed the first thing she found, a piece of broken fence post, and swung it at the raider's back with everything she had. The wood connected with a meaty thud. The raider stumbled, then turned to look at her. She'd made a terrible mistake. He was massive, easily twice her size, with scars that suggested he'd survived things that should have killed him. He grinned, showing teeth filed to points. "Brave," he said. "Stupid, but brave." He advanced. Lyra backed up, still clutching the fence post even though it felt useless now. Her mind raced. She had no wolf, no strength, no way to fight this. The raider raised his club. A gray wolf slammed into him from the side, all teeth and fury. Ronan's wolf was smaller than most alphas, but built for speed and violence. He tore into the raider with precision, going for the throat, the joints, anywhere that would disable fast. The second raider tried to help his friend and got a face full of claws for his trouble. Lyra ran to Senna, pulled her up. "Can you walk?" "I think... yeah." Senna's eyes were unfocused. "What's happening?" "Bloodwood raid. We need to move." Ronan shifted back to human, breathing hard, blood on his mouth. "Inner courtyard. Now. Both of you." This time, Lyra didn't argue. They ran together, joining the stream of people fleeing toward the keep. The inner courtyard was packed with civilians, mostly women, children, and the elderly who couldn't fight. Guards stood at the gates, checking everyone who entered, turning away anyone who looked suspicious. "In!" one of them barked, waving Lyra and Senna through. Ronan started to follow, but another guard stopped him. "Shifted wolves report to the captain. We need fighters on the walls." "I'm escorting the vet." "And now you're done. Move." Ronan looked at Lyra, expression complicated. Then he turned and ran toward the walls without another word. Inside the courtyard, chaos had a different flavor. Less violent, more desperate. Children crying, mothers trying to calm them. Old men clutching weapons they probably couldn't lift. Healers moving through the crowd, triaging injuries. Marin was one of them. "Get over here," she barked when she saw Lyra. "I need hands." Lyra helped where she could, holding people down while Marin set bones, fetching water and bandages, trying not to look at the worst injuries. A man with his arm half severed. A woman burned so badly her skin had melted. A child who kept asking for his mother who wasn't coming back. Hours blurred together. The sounds of fighting outside the walls rose and fell like waves. At some point, someone brought news that the eastern sector was lost, but the inner defenses were holding. At another point, someone said King Draven was fighting on the front lines, that he'd killed 12 raiders personally, that he was holding the main gate with just 10 wolves against 50. Lyra's hand shook every time she thought about it. Near dawn, the fighting finally stopped. Not because they'd won, because the raiders had taken what they wanted and retreated back into the Bloodwood, dragging captives and stolen supplies with them. The inner gates opened. Wolves started filtering back in, bloodied, exhausted, some limping, others being carried. Lyra searched every face, looking for one in particular. She found Kyle first. He stood near the center of the courtyard, surrounded by admirers, looking heroic despite the blood on his armor. He was telling a story, gesturing broadly, making it sound exciting rather than terrifying. "Came at me from 3 sides, but I shifted mid-dodge, caught the first one by surprise." People hung on every word. Lady Seraphina stood closest, touching his arm, laughing at his jokes like the attack had been entertainment. Lyra felt nothing looking at him. The obsession that had consumed her for months was just gone, burned away by the truth of who he actually was. She kept searching, found Draven near the gates, talking to his captain in low, urgent tones. He was covered in blood, some his, most not. A gash ran from his shoulder to his elbow, bleeding through hasty bandages. His face was drawn, exhausted, but his eyes were sharp and alert. Their gazes met across the courtyard. Something passed between them. Recognition. Relief. Something else she couldn't name. Then someone stepped between them, blocking her view. "You shouldn't be here." Lady Seraphina stood in front of her, pristine and perfect, despite the chaos around them. Not a hair out of place. Not a speck of blood on her dress. "Excuse me?" Lyra said. "The inner courtyard. It's for people who matter. You should be with the other servants in the lower levels." Fatigue made Lyra's filter disappear. "I've been helping the healers, saving lives." "What have you been doing? Watching from a window?" Seraphina's eyes went cold. "Careful, you're nobody. You can't talk to me like that." "Then walk away." "Not until you understand something." She leaned closer, voice dropping. "Whatever you think is happening with Kyle, it's already over. He's bored. You were a distraction, and now you're not even that." "I know." The admission seemed to surprise Seraphina. "I heard him. I know it was a game." Then why are you still here? Good question. Why was she still here, in this courtyard, in this kingdom, in this life that had given her nothing but pain? Because she was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being nothing. Because I belong here as much as you do, Lyra said quietly. More, maybe. I've bled for this kingdom, survived in it. You've just existed. Seraphina's face flushed. You presumptuous little... Is there a problem? Draven's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Both women turned. He stood 3 feet away, blood-soaked and dangerous, eyes fixed on Seraphina. Your Majesty. Seraphina's demeanor changed instantly, all sweetness and deference. No problem. I was just suggesting Lyra might be more comfortable with the other staff. She's fine where she is. Of course. I just thought... You thought wrong. His tone could have frozen fire. Is there anything else? Seraphina's smile was brittle. No, Your Majesty. She left, spine rigid with fury. Draven looked at Lyra. You're hurt. I'm fine. Your arm. She looked down. Blood soaked her sleeve. She hadn't even noticed. Must have happened during the fight, or while helping the healers. It's nothing, she said. Come with me. It wasn't a request. He led her through this crowd to a small building that served as the guard captain's office. Inside it was quiet, removed from the chaos. He gestured to a chair. She sat. He found a medical kit, pulled out clean bandages and something that smelled like alcohol and pain. This will sting, he warned. He wasn't wrong. She hissed when he cleaned the wound, a long gash from wrist to elbow, not deep but ugly. You should have stayed in the pack house, he said, wrapping the bandage with practiced efficiency. You told me to. And you ignored me. I did. His hand stilled. Why? Because I was tired of hiding, tired of being powerless, tired of waiting for someone to save me. She met his eyes. You told me to choose myself, so I did. Something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe. Or recognition that she'd finally understood. You saved someone, he said. During the fighting, one of the servants. Senna. She's my friend. You risked your life for her. Wouldn't you? I'm a king. It's different. No. She shook her head. It's not. You risk your life for people all the time, for the kingdom, for wolves you'll never meet. That's the same thing. He finished tying off the bandage, but didn't let go of her arm. His thumb traced the edge of the fabric, almost unconsciously. Your trouble, he said quietly. I know. My brother won't let this go. When he realizes you're not interested anymore, he'll find a way to hurt you. Let him try. Lyra, I'm not afraid of Kael. The truth of it surprised her. He's a child playing games. I'm done playing. Draven's eyes searched hers. And what about me? Are you done with me? Her heart did something complicated. That depends. On what? On whether you're real. Whether this, she gestured between them, is real or if it's another game. It's real. No hesitation. It's been real for longer than you know. How long? 2 years? Maybe more. He looked almost uncomfortable admitting it. I noticed you in the training yard. You were practicing alone after everyone else had left. You fell, hurt your wrist, and you didn't cry. Didn't quit. You just got back up and tried again. She remembered that day. Remembered the shame of failing, the determination to get it right. I've watched you survive in a world that wants to break you, he continued. Watched you stay kind when kindness costs you. Watched you be strong when you had every reason to give up. And He stopped, jaw clenched. You what? I wanted you. Wanted you to look at me the way you looked at my brother. Wanted you to choose me, not because I'm a king, but because you saw something worth choosing. The confession was raw, unpolished, nothing like the smooth words Kael had fed her. It was everything. I see you, she whispered. He kissed her, not gentle, not sweet, desperate and claiming and real, his hands fisting in her hair, pulling her up from the chair and against him. She tasted blood. His or hers she didn't know and didn't care. This was what she'd been looking for, this certainty, this fire. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "This won't be easy," he said. "They'll come for you. The nobles, the court, everyone who thinks you don't belong. I don't care. You should. Why? What's the worst they can do? Mock me? They already do. Hurt me? I've survived worse." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I'm not afraid anymore." "You should be." But he smiled when he said it, a rare expression that transformed his face from ice to something almost warm. They stayed like that, wrapped in each other, until shouting outside pulled them back to reality. Draven's expression went cold again, the king returning. "Stay here. Lock the door." "What's happening?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." He left, and she was alone with her thoughts and the smell of blood and smoke still clinging to everything. She should have stayed, should have listened, but she'd never been good at doing what she was supposed to. She left the building, followed the sounds of commotion to the main courtyard where a crowd had gathered. People were shouting, pointing, arguing. At the center of it all stood Kael, looking furious. "Unacceptable," he was saying. "She's been manipulating him, using her position to get close." "Enough!" Draven's voice cut through the noise. He stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed. "What is this about?" Kael turned to him, expression twisted with something ugly. "It's about her." He pointed. At Lyra. Every eye turned to stare. "She's been seducing you," Kael said, voice rising. "Taking advantage of your grief, your isolation, worming her way into your confidence. You have no idea what you're talking about." Draven's tone was dangerous. "Don't I? Everyone's seen it. The way she looks at you, the way you protect her. She's a nobody, Draven. Wolfless, powerless, and she's making you weak." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Lyra's stomach twisted. This was it, the moment everything fell apart. "You're projecting," Draven said coldly. "This is about you, not her. This is about the kingdom, about maintaining standards, hierarchy, order. You can't let someone like her..." "Someone like her saved lives tonight while you were performing for an audience." Draven moved forward, and the crowd parted like he was made of blades. "She risked herself for others while you calculated how to make yourself look heroic. So before you lecture me about standards, look at your own." Kael's face went red. "You're defending her because you're sleeping with her." The crowd gasped. Draven went very still. "Careful, brother. It's true, isn't it? The king and the kitchen girl, it's pathetic. She's nothing..." "Finish that sentence and see what happens." The threat was clear, absolute. Everyone heard it. Kael backed down, but his eyes promised retribution. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Draven turned to Lyra, held out his hand. "Come here." She hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to not make this worse, to disappear. But she'd chosen herself, chosen truth over comfortable lies. She took his hand. The crowd erupted in whispers. Draven pulled her close, possessive and deliberate. "Anyone who has a problem with this can address it with me directly." His eyes swept the crowd. "Otherwise, get back to your duties. There's a kingdom to rebuild." People dispersed, but slowly, still staring. Kael didn't move. "You'll regret this." "Probably." Draven didn't sound concerned. "But it'll be my regret, not yours." Kael left, fury radiating from every step. Lyra looked up at Draven. "You just declared..." "I know what I did." "They'll never accept..." "I don't care." He tilted her chin up. "I'm done hiding, done pretending. If they can't handle it, that's their problem." "Draven." Shouts erupted from the eastern wall, different than before, more urgent, more afraid. A guard ran toward them, face pale. "Your Majesty, the raiders." "They're back." "More of them, hundreds more." Draven's expression went cold. "How long?" "Minutes, maybe less. They're coming from the Bloodwood, all of them." This wasn't a raid, this was an invasion. "Sound the alarm," Draven ordered. "Get everyone inside the keep, seal the gates, and someone find me a sword that isn't covered in blood." The guard ran. Draven turned to Lyra. "This time you actually need to..." "I know, I'll go." But she didn't. She couldn't. Because standing at the edge of the courtyard, watching the chaos unfold, she realized something that made her blood run cold. The raiders weren't just attacking randomly, they were moving with purpose, coordination. Someone was leading them, someone who knew exactly how to break Iron Peak. "Draven," she said urgently, "this is a trap. The explosion cut her off. Fire erupted from the western wall, not from outside, but from within. Someone had planted explosives, timed to go off during the confusion. The wall collapsed inward, crushing buildings, blocking escape routes. And through the smoke and flames, more raiders poured in. They were surrounded. "Run!" Draven shoved her toward the keep. "Now!" But it was too late. Raiders flooded the courtyard, wolves shifted, weapons drawn, but they were outnumbered and exhausted from the first attack. Lyra ran anyway, trying to reach the keep, trying to survive. A raider stepped in her path. She dodged left. Another blocked her. She was trapped. The raiders advanced, grinning, weapons raised. She was going to die here, in this courtyard. Powerless. Exactly like everyone had always said. Then something inside her cracked. Not her ribs, not her spirit. Something deeper. Something that had been sleeping for 19 years, waiting for the moment when survival wasn't enough anymore. When the choice was transform or die. Heat exploded through her body. Her bones screamed, her skin burned. Every nerve was on fire, and she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but feel as something ancient and furious tore its way to the surface. She heard herself screaming, her Draven shouting her name. And then the world went white with pain and power and the absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. When the light faded, she was on her hands and knees. Except they weren't hands anymore. They were paws. Covered in fur the color of moonlight and shadow. She looked up through eyes that saw too sharply, heard too clearly, smelled blood and fear and smoke like they were physical things. The raiders had backed away. All of them. Staring at her with something that looked like fear. "Impossible," someone breathed. Lyra tried to speak, but what came out was a growl that shook the stones beneath her. She'd shifted. After 19 years of nothing, she'd finally shifted. And judging by the looks on everyone's faces, including Draven's, she wasn't just any wolf. She was something else entirely. The world looked different through wolf eyes. Sharper. Brighter. Every sound amplified until Lyra could hear heartbeats, hers hammering like war drums, the raiders quickening with fear. Draven steady and strong somewhere to her left. Scents flooded her nose in waves, blood, smoke, sweat, terror, and underneath it all, something metallic and ancient that she didn't have words for. Power. She could smell power radiating from her own skin like heat from a forge. The raiders stood frozen, weapons half raised, staring at her like she was something out of nightmare. One of them, the massive scarred man who'd nearly killed her earlier, took a step backward. "What is that?" someone whispered. Lyra tried to answer, but her vocal cords didn't work the same way anymore. What came out was a sound between a growl and something deeper, something that resonated in her chest and made the stones beneath her paws vibrate. The raiders flinched. She looked down at herself, at paws easily twice the size of a normal wolf's, at fur that seemed to shift between silver and shadow depending on how the light hit it, at claws that looked like they could tear through steel. She was bigger than any wolf she'd ever seen. Bigger than the alphas, bigger than Draven in his shifted form. What the hell was she? "Lyra!" Draven's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Still human, still bleeding, but his eyes held something between awe and concern. "Can you understand me?" She nodded. The movement felt strange with her new anatomy, but it worked. "Good. Listen to me very carefully. The raiders are regrouping. We're outnumbered. I need you to—" A raider lunged at him from behind, axe raised. Lyra moved without thinking. 1 second she was 20 feet away. The next she was between them, catching the axe in her jaws and crushing the blade like it was made of clay. The raider stumbled backward, weaponless, eyes wide with terror. She spat out the broken metal and growled. The sound was massive, primal. It rolled across the courtyard like thunder, and every raider heard it in their bones. Some of them ran. The rest hesitated, looking to their leaders for orders. Draven's hand touched her shoulder, the wolf equivalent anyway. The contact sent electricity through her entire body. "We need to push them back, drive them toward the eastern gate. Can you do that?" Could she? She had no idea. She'd been a wolf for approximately 90 seconds. Her entire existence was one massive question mark. But she nodded anyway. Good. He shifted, bones cracking and reforming until a massive gray wolf stood beside her. Still smaller than her new form, but powerful and scarred from decades of battle. His eyes met hers, pale blue even in wolf form, and something passed between them. Trust, partnership, the promise that whatever happened next, they'd face it together. Then he threw his head back and howled. The sound rallied the scattered Iron Peak wolves. They appeared from buildings and alleys, some injured, all exhausted, but responding to their king's call. Within seconds, 50 wolves stood ready, forming a line behind Draven and Lyra. The raiders saw them and hesitated. Now! Draven's voice came through the pack bond, that psychic connection all shifted wolves shared. She'd never heard it before, never been part of it, but suddenly his thoughts were clear as spoken words in her mind. Drive them back. They charged. Lyra had never fought as a wolf, had never fought as anything, really, beyond that one disastrous attempt with Ronan. But instinct took over. Instinct and something else, something ancient buried in her DNA that remembered how to hunt, how to kill, how to protect. She hit the first raider like a landslide, all momentum and fury. He went down hard, unconscious before he hit the ground. She didn't stop, moved to the next one, using her size and weight like weapons, scattering raiders like leaves in a storm. Beside her, Draven fought with brutal precision. Throat strikes, crippling bites, nothing wasted. The other wolves followed their lead, pushing the raiders backward, reclaiming the courtyard foot by bloody foot. The raiders broke. It happened all at once. One moment they were fighting, the next they were running, abandoning weapons and wounded comrades in their desperation to reach the broken eastern gate. Some made it, others didn't. Within minutes, the courtyard was theirs again. Wolves stood panting, bloodied, victorious. The raiders who'd survived were fleeing into the bloodwood, and nobody was stupid enough to follow them into those cursed trees at night. Draven shifted back to human first, standing naked and covered in blood among the carnage. Nobody seemed to care about modesty. That was normal after battles. He looked at Lyra, still in wolf form, and something complicated crossed his face. "You can shift back now," he said quietly. She tried, focused on her human body, on hands and skin in normal proportions. Nothing happened. She tried again. Pushed harder, reached for the place inside where she'd always been human, always been Lyra. Still nothing. The wolf form held her like a trap. Panic spiked in her chest. "Easy." Draven moved closer, hand extended. "Don't fight it. Breathe. First shifts are hard. The wolf doesn't want to let go yet." She whined, a sound she didn't mean to make but couldn't stop. I know it's terrifying, but you're safe. You're in control. Just breathe and let go slowly." She focused on his voice, on the steadiness in his eyes. Tried to relax muscles she didn't know she had. Gradually, slowly, she felt the wolf form start to recede. The shift back was worse than the shift forward. Every bone rearranging, every muscle compressing, skin stretching over shrinking frames. She gasped when it was done, on her hands and knees, actual human hands, shaking violently. Someone threw a cloak over her. She pulled it around herself, suddenly aware that she was naked in a courtyard full of staring wolves. "Everyone back to your posts," Draven ordered, voice carrying authority that made people move without question. "Get the wounded to the healers. Triple the guard on all gates. I want reports on casualties within the hour." Wolves scattered, following orders, but Lyra could feel their stares, hear the whispers starting already. "Did you see the size? Never seen anything like... What kind of wolf?" Draven silenced them with a look. Then he crouched beside Lyra, still shaking under the cloak. "Can you stand?" "I think so." Her voice came out hoarse, raw. He helped her up, keeping one hand on her elbow until he was sure she wouldn't collapse. She felt like she'd been beaten with hammers, every muscle screaming, but she was alive. They were alive. "What happened?" she whispered. "What am I?" "Later. First we need to say no." She pulled back, meeting his eyes. "Now. Everyone saw. Everyone's going to ask. I need to know what the hell I just became." He was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Then, "You're a prime." The word meant nothing to her. "A what?" "A prime alpha. The original bloodline. They're..." He stopped, choosing words carefully. Rare. One in a generation, maybe less. Stronger than normal alphas, bigger, more dominant, and extremely valuable. Valuable how? Every pack wants one. To breed, to lead, to claim as their own. His jaw tightened. You just became the most sought-after wolf in 5 kingdoms. The implications hit her like cold water. So I went from nobody to a target. He said it bluntly. The moment word spreads, every alpha in range will come for you, some to court you, others to force you into their packs. And some, he didn't finish, but she understood. Some would try to kill her, to prevent rival packs from gaining that kind of power. That's insane. That's reality. He pulled her closer, proprietary and protective. Which is why you're not leaving my sight until we figure this out. Draven, not negotiable. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could take care of herself. But the truth was she had no idea what she was doing. 90 seconds of being a wolf didn't make her an expert, and she'd just painted the world's biggest target on her back. Okay, she said quietly. Something in his expression eased. Come on, let's get you cleaned up before… Brother? They both turned. Kael stood at the edge of the courtyard, still in his expensive armor, expression unreadable. He'd watched the whole fight from somewhere safe, Lyra realized. Hadn't joined, hadn't helped, just observed. Kael. Draven's tone was flat. If you're here to cause more problems, I'm here to apologize. The words sounded forced, but Kael said them anyway. I was wrong. About her. About you. About all of it. Convenient timing, Lyra said. Now that I'm valuable. His eyes flicked to her, something sharp in them. I'm trying to make amends. No, you're trying to save face. She stepped forward, still wrapped in the cloak, still shaking but refusing to show it. You used me, made me a game piece, and now that I'm not powerless anymore, suddenly you care? Lyra, don't! She cut him off. I know exactly what you are, Kael. And I know what I was to you. An ego boost. A way to manipulate Seraphina. A distraction when you were bored. His jaw tightened. That's not entirely… It is entirely. Draven's voice was ice. And if you come near her again without a very good reason, I will personally remove you from this kingdom, brother or not. The threat hung in the air. Kael's expression went cold. You'd choose her over your own blood? Without hesitation. Something ugly flashed across Kael's face. Then he schooled it into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Understood. I'll leave you to your… prize. He left, but the tension he'd brought stayed behind. He's going to be a problem, Lyra said quietly. He's always been a problem. Now he's just a predictable one. They made their way to the keep, the most fortified structure in Iron Peak, built into the mountain itself. Inside, the halls were chaos with wounded being brought in, orders being shouted, people running in every direction. Draven cut through it all like a knife, pulling Lyra toward the royal quarters. The guards at the door stiffened when they saw her. She's with me, Draven said, daring them to argue. They didn't. Inside, the rooms were sparse but functional. Stone walls, simple furniture, a large bed that looked like it rarely got used. Maps covered one wall, weapons lined another. This was a soldier's space, not a king's palace. Draven found clean clothes, a shirt that hung to her knees, pants she had to roll up 5 times. These will do until we can get you something that fits. She changed behind a screen, hands still shaking. When she emerged, he was pouring 2 glasses of something amber and strong. Drink, he said, handing her one. She drank. It burned going down but settled the shaking. How do you feel? He asked. Like I was turned inside out and reassembled wrong. That's normal. First shifts are brutal. It gets easier. Does it? She looked at him. Do you know what you're getting into? Defending me? Claiming me in front of everyone? Yes. They'll hate you for it. The nobles, the court, everyone who thinks I don't belong. I don't care what they think. You should. You're a king. You need their support. I need a lot of things. He set down his glass, moved closer. Their support isn't at the top of the list. Then what is? He cupped her face, thumb tracing her jaw. You, safe, alive. Here. The simplicity of it broke something in her chest. I'm not worth... Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't do that. Don't diminish yourself because they spent years making you believe you were worthless. You're a prime alpha, Lyra. You're powerful, rare. And even if you weren't, even if you'd never shifted, never become anything special, I'd still choose you. Why? Because you're brave when you have every reason to be afraid. Because you're kind in a world that punishes kindness. Because you looked at me and saw a person, not a crown. His forehead touched hers. Because you make me want to be better than I am. She kissed him, hard and desperate and grateful, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. He responded instantly, hands in her hair, pulling her closer until there was no space between them. They broke apart only when breathing became necessary. If we're doing this, she said, if we're actually doing this, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't protect me from the consequences. Don't fight my battles for me. I need to prove myself, to them and to me. Can you let me do that? He was quiet for a long moment. That's going to be very hard. I know. My instinct is to destroy anything that threatens you. I know that too, but I'm asking anyway. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. I can't promise I won't intervene if your life is in danger. I'm not asking you to watch me die. I'm asking you to let me be strong. Let me earn their respect instead of just being handed it because the king says so. You already earned it. You saved lives tonight, fought when you had no obligation to fight. They don't see it that way. They see me as your weakness, your mistake. I need to show them I'm not. His thumb traced her bottom lip. You're going to be insufferably stubborn about this, aren't you? Probably. Fine. But if Kyle or anyone else tries to hurt you, all bets are off. Deal. A knock at the door interrupted them. What? Draven called, not stepping away from Lyra. Your Majesty. The guard's voice was muffled through the wood. The council is assembled. They're requesting your presence. And a pause. Hers. Draven's expression went cold. Tell them I'll be there when I'm ready. But they're insisting it's urgent. I don't care. Lyra touched his arm. We should go. Delaying will only make it worse. They're going to tear into you. Let them. She straightened her shoulders. I can handle it. That's what I'm afraid of. The council room was exactly as intimidating as she'd imagined. Large, circular, with a table that could seat 20 surrounded by wolves who looked like they'd rather eat her than acknowledge her. The air smelled like old power and older grudges. Draven entered first, Lyra a half step behind. Every eye turned to them. Lord Castor spoke first. Ancient, scarred, missing one ear from a battle decades ago. Your Majesty, we need to discuss the evening's developments. Then discuss. Draven sat at the head of the table, gestured for Lyra to take the chair beside him. The one usually reserved for the king's second in command. The statement was clear, deliberate. Murmurs erupted around the table. Is this appropriate? Lady Vex asked, her voice cold. She's not council, not even ranked. She's a prime alpha who just helped save this kingdom, Draven said flatly. I'd say that's appropriate enough. A prime alpha we know nothing about, Lord Castor countered. Her bloodline is unknown. Her parents were nobodies. Where did this power come from? Does it matter? Lyra spoke before she could stop herself. The table went silent. I shifted. I fought. I helped protect this kingdom. Why does my bloodline matter? Because bloodlines determine everything, Lady Vex said, like she was explaining to a child. Breeding, alliances, political value. If we don't know your lineage, we can't verify your power is legitimate. You saw me shift. How much more legitimate do you need? Parlor tricks can be faked. Are you calling me a liar? I'm calling you suspicious. Lady Vex leaned forward. 19 years with no wolf? Then suddenly you manifest as a prime during a convenient crisis? Forgive me if I question the timing. Draven's hand slammed on the table. Careful. You're accusing her of treason. I'm asking reasonable questions. No, you're trying to delegitimize her because you don't like that she exists. His voice was deadly quiet. Say it clearly. You think she's a fake, a plant, a trick. You think I'm being manipulated? Silence. Anyone else share this concern? He looked around the table. Now's your chance to voice it. Lord Castor cleared his throat. Not manipulation, Your Majesty, but we must consider the possibility of outside interference. The Bloodwood Raiders have never been this organized. What if she's connected? Stop. Lyra stood, chair scraping against stone. You think I'm working with the people who tried to kill me, who killed my parents, who've terrorized this kingdom for decades? We think it's suspicious that you manifested the exact moment they attacked. Because I was about to die. Her voice rose. Because I had no choice. It was shift or get slaughtered, so my body finally did what it should have done years ago. That's not suspicious. That's survival. Or excellent timing, Lady Vex said coldly. Enough. Draven's voice cut through the room like a blade. This council exists to advise me, not to interrogate people under my protection. If you have legitimate concerns about the raid, present them. If you're here to attack Lyra, this meeting is over. We're trying to protect you, Lord Castor said. Protect the kingdom. If she's compromised, then I'm compromised, Draven said flatly. Because she stays under my protection in this kingdom. And anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me directly. The threat was clear, absolute. No one spoke. Good. Now, casualty reports. How many did we lose? The meeting continued, but the tension stayed thick enough to choke on. Lyra sat silently, listening to numbers and strategies and plans for rebuilding the walls. She caught glances throughout, some curious, some hostile, some calculating. They were trying to figure out how to use her, or dispose of her. She kept her expression neutral and her mouth shut. When the meeting finally ended, she followed Draven back to his quarters, exhaustion hitting her like a physical weight. That went well, she said dryly. They'll come around. Will they? Or will they just get better at hiding their contempt? He pulled her close, hands on her waist. I don't care if they ever accept you, as long as you're safe. But I care. She looked up at him. I need to prove myself. Show them I'm not a threat or a trick or whatever they think I am. How? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. He kissed her forehead. You're exhausted. Sleep. We'll deal with tomorrow when it comes. She wanted to argue, wanted to plan, strategize, fix everything immediately, but her body had other ideas. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by bone-deep fatigue that made standing difficult. Draven guided her to the bed, pulled back the covers. Sleep. I'll be here. You need to sleep too. I will, after I check the perimeter reports. She wanted to insist, but her eyes were already closing. The last thing she remembered was his hand in her hair and the feeling of being safe for the first time in her life. She woke to shouting. Draven was already moving, pulling on clothes, grabbing weapons. Stay here. What's happening? I don't know, but it's coming from the main courtyard. She ignored his order and followed him, still wearing his borrowed shirt and pants, feet bare against cold stone. The courtyard was packed with people. Wolves, civilians, guards, everyone staring at the main gate where someone was causing a scene. She pushed through the crowd until she could see. Kyle stood in the center, surrounded by guards, looking furious and disheveled. And beside him, Lyra's heart stopped. Lady Seraphina, torn dress, bruised face, tears streaming down her cheeks. She attacked me, Seraphina sobbed, pointing directly at Lyra. The kitchen girl, the wolf, she attacked me in my rooms, tried to kill me because I warned her to stay away from the prince. The crowd turned to stare at Lyra. That's a lie, Lyra said, voice steady despite her racing heart. I haven't been anywhere near her. She's lying, Seraphina's voice rose. She's jealous, unstable. Look what she did to me. You did that to yourself, Lyra said coldly. Or had someone do it for you. You're calling me a liar? I'm calling you a schemer. This is Kael's plan, isn't it? Frame me for attacking you, turn the kingdom against me, force Draven to choose between me and his people. Kael's expression was carefully neutral. Those are serious accusations. And so are hers. Lyra stepped forward. But here's the difference. I can prove I didn't attack her. Where were you tonight, Kael? After the council meeting, who were you with? Something flickered in his eyes. That's irrelevant. Is it? Because I bet if we ask around, we'll find you were with Seraphina, staging this little performance. You have no proof. Don't I? She turned to Draven, heart pounding. Your rooms have guards posted. Ask them if I left. Draven's eyes narrowed. He looked at the guards flanking his door. Did she? No, Your Majesty, one of them said immediately. She's been inside since the meeting ended. They're protecting her, Seraphina cried. Of course they'll lie for the king's whore. The crowd gasped. Draven moved so fast Lyra almost didn't see it. 1 second he was across the courtyard. The next he had Kael by the throat, slamming him against the stone wall. You orchestrated this, he said, voice deadly calm. Used Seraphina to frame Lyra. Thought you could turn my people against her. I don't know what... Don't. Draven's grip tightened. Don't insult me by lying. This is exactly your style. Manipulative, cowardly, pathetic. She's making you weak, Kael choked out. The kingdom sees it. They're losing faith. The kingdom can think what it wants, but you... Draven leaned closer. You just committed treason. Falsely accusing someone under royal protection, attempting to undermine the throne. That's grounds for exile. You wouldn't. Try me. Silence fell across the courtyard. Kael's eyes went wide, finally understanding that his brother was serious. You're going to choose her over me, he said, almost disbelieving. Your own blood. I already did. The moment you tried to hurt her. Draven released him, stepped back. You have until dawn to leave Iron Peak. If you're still here when the sun rises, I'll have you dragged to the border in chains. Draven, that's not a suggestion. That's an order from your king. The finality in those words broke something in Kael's expression. He looked around, at the crowd, at Seraphina still crying fake tears, at Lyra standing quiet and unmoved. You'll regret this, he said quietly. Probably, but it'll still be worth it. Kael left, Seraphina trailing behind, both of them diminished and defeated. The crowd began to disperse, whispering, processing what they'd just witnessed. Draven turned to Lyra. You all right? You just exiled your brother. For me. I exiled a traitor. The fact that he's my brother just makes it more necessary. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the magnitude of what he'd just done. Your Majesty, Lord Castor approached, expression troubled. That was bold. That was necessary. The nobles won't like it. Kael had supporters. Then they're welcome to follow him. Draven's tone was ice. I'm done tolerating threats to my throne, to my people, to her. Lord Castor looked at Lyra, something shifting in his expression. Not acceptance exactly, but recognition. She must be extraordinary to be worth all this. She is. The old lord nodded slowly. Then, to Lyra's shock, he bowed. Slightly, but deliberately. I may have been too harsh in the council meeting, he said. Forgive an old wolf his suspicions. It wasn't an apology, but it was close. Suspicion is smart, Lyra said. Especially now. But I'm not your enemy, Lord Castor. I'm just trying to survive. Same as everyone else. He studied her for a long moment, then smiled, barely, but it was there. Perhaps you will, at that. He left, and slowly, others began to approach. Not everyone, but enough, offering cautious respect, acknowledging her existence, treating her like she might actually belong. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a start. Draven's hand found hers squeezed gently. Still think you need to prove yourself? He asked quietly. More than ever. This just made it harder. Good. He pulled her close, ignoring the remaining crowd. I like you difficult. She laughed despite everything, despite the exhaustion and fear and chaos. For the first time in her life, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could actually do this. Survive. Thrive. Belong. Not because someone gave her permission, but because she'd earned it. The week following Kael's exile was the longest of Lyra's life. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. No attacks, no raids, no dramatic confrontations. Just the slow, grinding work of proving she deserved to exist in a world that had spent 19 years telling her she didn't. She trained in the mornings with Ronan, who'd somehow become her unlikely ally. Turned out nearly dying together created bonds that politeness never could. Again, he barked, circling her in the training yard. And this time, don't telegraph your left. She shifted, the transformation coming easier now, though still painful, and lunged. He dodged, swept her legs, sent her crashing to the dirt. Dead, he said flatly. Third time this morning. She shifted back, spitting dust. I'm trying. Try harder. Being big doesn't mean anything if you're slow. He offered a hand, pulled her up. Prime alphas have targets on their backs. You need to be fast, smart, and vicious. Right now you're just big and clumsy. Thanks for the encouragement. If you want encouragement, talk to the king. You want to survive. Listen to me. She listened, trained until her muscles screamed and her wolf form felt almost natural. Learned to use her size as an advantage rather than a liability. Discovered that being underestimated was its own kind of weapon. In the afternoons, she worked with Marin, learning to control the power that thrummed under her skin like a second heartbeat. The old healer had experience with prime bloodlines. Her own grandmother had been one, apparently, though the family line had diluted over generations. Power without control is just destruction waiting to happen, Marin said, watching Lyra try to shift only her hands. You need to master this before the gathering. What gathering? Marin gave her a look that said she was being deliberately obtuse. The moon gathering, 3 weeks from now, when the king presents his chosen mate to the kingdom. Lyra's stomach dropped. We haven't, that's not decided. Isn't it? Marin's expression was knowing. Child, the whole kingdom saw him exile his own brother for you. That's not something a man does casually. It was about treason, not... It was about you, and if you think otherwise, you're lying to yourself. Lyra didn't have an answer for that. The evenings belonged to Draven. They fell into a routine, dinner in his quarters, talking about the day's challenges, planning for threats that might come. Sometimes they talked strategy. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, his hand in hers, both of them too exhausted for words. One night, 2 weeks after the exile, he asked the question she'd been dreading. The moon gathering is coming, he said, pouring wine into 2 cups. I need to make an announcement. Her heart jumped. About what? About you. About us. He handed her a cup. I want to present you as my chosen mate, officially, in front of the entire kingdom. The wine suddenly tasted like ash. Draven, I know what you're going to say, that it's too soon, that they're not ready, that you haven't proven yourself yet. He set down his cup, took both her hands. But I don't care about their timeline. I care about mine. And I've wasted enough of my life pretending I don't want things I desperately want. This isn't about what you want. It's about what's smart, what's strategic. Since when do you care about strategy over honesty? Since your throne depends on it. She pulled her hands free, stood up, paced. You've already exiled your brother. If you bind yourself to me now, someone with no bloodline, no allies, no political value, you'll lose what support you have left. Then I'll lose it. You can't mean that. I do. He stood, closed the distance between them. I've been king for 7 years, Lyra. 7 years of political marriages being suggested, alliances being offered, noble daughters being paraded in front of me like cattle. And I've refused them all because I was waiting for something real. I'm not. You are. His hands cupped her face. You're real. You're brave. You challenge me, see through my walls, make me feel things I thought I'd buried. And I'm done pretending that doesn't matter more than politics. She wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But the truth was, she wanted it too. Wanted him. Wanted this life where she mattered, where she was chosen, where she could finally stop fighting just to exist. What if I mess it up? She whispered. What if I'm not ready? Then we'll figure it out together. He kissed her forehead. But I need to know, do you want this? Not because it's strategic or smart or politically valuable. Do you want me? The answer was easy. Yes. Then the rest is details. He made it sound simple. It wasn't. The moon gathering was Iron Peak's most important social event. When alliances were announced, disputes were settled, and the kingdom came together to celebrate survival in a world that wanted them dead. It was held in the Great Hall, with hundreds of wolves packed into a space that smelled like power and old rivalries. Lyra had never attended one. Kitchen staff weren't invited. Now she stood in Draven's quarters, staring at the dress someone had delivered that morning. Deep blue silk that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. Fitted and elegant and completely terrifying. "I can't wear that," she told Senna, who'd been recruited to help her get ready. "You have to. You're about to be presented as the future queen." "I'm about to be presented as a target." "Same thing, really." Senna held up the dress. "Arms up." Lyra obeyed, letting herself be dressed like a doll. The silk felt foreign against her skin, too smooth, too expensive. She didn't recognize herself in the mirror. "You look beautiful," Senna said softly. "I look like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not." "Maybe that's the point. Fake it until it's real." There was a knock at the door. Draven entered, dressed in formal black that made him look every inch the king. He stopped when he saw her. "You're staring," she said. "I'm allowed." He crossed to her, took her hand. "You ready?" "No." "Good. Neither am I." They walked to the great hall together, fingers intertwined, both pretending to be braver than they felt. The hall was already packed when they arrived. Wolves in their finest, nobles clustered in groups, the air thick with anticipation and barely concealed judgment. Conversations died as Draven entered, Lyra at his side. Every eye turned to them. Lyra's instinct was to shrink, to hide, to disappear. But Draven's hand tightened on hers, and she remembered what she'd told him weeks ago. "Let me be strong." So she lifted her chin and walked like she belonged there. They took their places at the head of the hall on a raised platform where everyone could see. Draven didn't release her hand. Lord Castor stepped forward, acting as master of ceremonies. "We gather under the full moon to celebrate our strength, honor our bonds, and forge our future. His Majesty has announcements to make." Draven stood, and the room went silent. 3 weeks ago, our kingdom was attacked, he began, voice carrying to every corner. "We lost good wolves, brave wolves. Wolves who fought and died protecting what we've built here." Murmurs of agreement. "But we also discovered something that night, something unexpected." His eyes found Lyra. "We discovered that strength doesn't always announce itself early, that power can hide for years, waiting for the moment when it's needed most, and that the wolves we dismiss as weak might be the strongest among us." Lyra's heart was hammering. "Most of you know Lyra Vance," Draven continued. "Some of you have dismissed her, mocked her, told her she didn't belong. But when raiders breached our walls and death came for us all, she didn't run. She didn't hide. She fought. And in fighting, she became what she was always meant to be, a prime alpha." The crowd erupted in whispers. "I stand before you tonight to announce my intention to take her as my mate, my equal, my queen." Silence. Then chaos. Voices rose in protest, shock, disbelief. Nobles stood, arguing. Some looked outraged. Others looked calculating, already adjusting their strategies. Lord Castor raised his hand for silence. "His Majesty has made his intention clear, however." He looked at Draven apologetically. "Tradition requires challenges be offered." "I'm aware," Draven said flatly. "Then let it be known. Any wolf who wishes to contest this union may issue a formal challenge, to be resolved before the king's binding is finalized." Lyra's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means someone can challenge your right to be queen," Draven said quietly, "through combat. That's insane. That's tradition." A figure stepped forward from the crowd. Lady Vex, looking pleased with herself. "I issue challenge." Of course she did. "On what grounds?" Draven demanded. "On the grounds that she's unproven. We know nothing of her bloodline, her training, her ability to lead. A queen must be strong and more than just shifting." Lady Vex smiled coldly. "I challenge her to single combat. If she wins, I'll acknowledge her claim. If she loses..." She shrugged. "Then she was never worthy to begin with." The crowd murmured approval. This was the kind of drama they loved. Draven looked ready to murder someone. "This is unnecessary." "I accept," Lyra said. Every head turned to her. "You don't have to do this," Draven said urgently. "I can refuse the challenge on your behalf." "No." She squeezed his hand once, then released it. "You told me I needed to prove myself. So did Lord Castor. So did half this room. Here's my chance." "Lyra, I'm not asking permission." She looked at Lady Vex. "When and where?" Lady Vex's smile widened. Now, in the training yard, shifted combat, first blood or submission. Done. The crowd surged toward the doors, excited for violence. Draven caught Lyra's arm. This is a trap, he said. Vex is twice your age, trained since childhood. She's trying to humiliate you. Let her try. I can't watch you get hurt. Yes, you can. She met his eyes. Because this is my fight, and I need to win it myself. He looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he kissed her, hard and desperate and brief. Don't you dare lose. Wasn't planning on it. The training yard was lit by torches, casting dancing shadows on the stones where Lyra had been humiliated by Ronan months ago. Full circle, she thought. Poetic, if you like that kind of thing. Lady Vex was already shifted. A sleek gray wolf, smaller than Lyra but built for speed and precision. Scars marked her fur from decades of fights. Lyra shifted, bones cracking, power flooding her system. Her wolf form still felt too big, too powerful, like wearing someone else's skin, but it was hers. Finally, hers. The crowd formed a circle, wolves and humans alike, all watching with hungry eyes. Lord Castor stood between them. Rules are simple. First blood or submission. No killing, no maiming. Understood? Both wolves dipped their heads. Then begin. Lady Vex attacked immediately, all speed and experience. She went low, aiming for Lyra's legs, trying to cripple her mobility. Lyra dodged, barely, her size making her slower but her reach longer. She snapped at Vex's flank, missed. They circled each other, looking for openings. You're too slow, Vex's voice came through the pack bond, cold and mocking. All that power, and you don't know how to use it. Lyra didn't respond, saved her breath for fighting. Vex lunged again, feinted left, went right, caught Lyra's shoulder with her teeth. Not deep enough for first blood, but painful. The crowd murmured. Lyra spun, using her weight to throw Vex off. The older wolf rolled, came up fighting, darted in again. This time Lyra was ready. She caught Vex mid-lunge, used the momentum to slam her into the ground. Vex yelped, scrambled away. Lucky, Vex snarled. Skill, Lyra shot back. They clashed again, all teeth and fury. Vex was faster, more experienced, but Lyra was stronger, and she was learning. Every mistake Vex made, Lyra cataloged. Every pattern, every tell. Ronan's training clicked into place. Stop trying to match her speed. Use your size. Make her come to you. Lyra planted her feet and waited. Vex circled, looking for an opening. Then committed, darting in for another leg strike. Lyra dropped her weight, caught Vex's scruff in her jaws, and lifted. The older wolf thrashed, snarling, but Lyra's grip held. She slammed Vex into the ground hard enough to crack stone. Vex went limp. Submission. Lyra released her immediately, stepped back, breathing hard. The crowd was silent. Lady Vex shifted back to human, coughing, one hand pressed to her ribs. She looked up at Lyra with something between respect and fury. You win, she said hoarsely. I know. Vex stood, swaying slightly. Then, to everyone's shock, she bowed, formally, deeply. I acknowledge your claim, she said. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. It wasn't warm, but it was genuine. Lyra shifted back, someone throwing a cloak over her shoulders. She scanned the crowd, looking for other challengers. None came. Lord Castor stepped forward. Are there any other challenges? Silence. Then, by tradition and rite of combat, Lyra Vance's claim is acknowledged. He looked at her with something almost like approval. Well fought. The crowd began to disperse, some looking disappointed the fight hadn't lasted longer, others looking thoughtful. Draven appeared at her side immediately, hands checking her for injuries. You're bleeding. Just scratches. You could have been killed. But I wasn't. She caught his hand, stilling them. I won. I proved myself. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted you safe. Same thing. He pulled her close, not caring who saw. Don't ever do that to me again. Make me queen and I'll have to do it regularly. Then maybe I'll reconsider. She knew he wouldn't. The week before the binding ceremony passed in a blur of preparation and politics. Lyra met with advisors, learned protocols she'd never needed to know, tried on more dresses than should legally exist. She hated every minute of it, but she endured. Because this was the price of choosing herself, of being seen. The night before the ceremony, she found herself back on the roof where Draven had found her weeks ago. The stars were clear, the air cold, and Iron Peak stretched below her like something almost beautiful. Couldn't sleep? She turned. Draven stood at the top of the stairs, dressed in simple clothes, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him in days. Too many thoughts, she said. He joined her at the edge, looking out over the kingdom. Second thoughts? Third and fourth, actually. About me or about this? About whether I'm ready, whether I'll ever be ready. She pulled the cloak tighter. A month ago, I was nobody. Now I'm about to become queen. That's insane. You were never nobody, he said quietly. You were just waiting for the world to catch up. That's generous. That's true. He turned to face her. You want to know what I see when I look at you? Probably not. Someone who survived 19 years in a kingdom that tried to break her and refused to let it. Someone who risked her life for strangers. Someone who fights even when she's terrified. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am. His hand found hers. That's not nobody, Lyra. That's everything. She kissed him, slow and deep, trying to pour everything she felt into it. When they broke apart, her fears were still there, but quieter. Tomorrow, she said, everything changes. Tomorrow, he agreed, but tonight, we're just us. They stayed on that roof until dawn, talking and silent by turns, holding each other against the cold. When the sun rose, they climbed down together. Ready or not, the future was coming. The binding ceremony was held at sunset when the moon was just beginning to rise. The great hall had been transformed. Flowers everywhere, candles burning, every surface polished until it gleamed. The entire kingdom had been invited, from the highest nobles to the lowest servants. Lyra stood in a side room, wearing a dress that made her look like something out of a legend. White silk threaded with silver fitted perfectly, making her look taller, stronger, more regal than she felt. Marin fussed with her hair, weaving in small white flowers. You look like a queen. I look like I'm playing dress-up. Same thing, dear. There was a knock. Senna poked her head in. It's time. Lyra's stomach flipped. Already? You can still run, Marin said, only half joking. Don't tempt me. But she didn't run. She walked to the great hall, heart pounding, palms sweating, every instinct screaming at her to hide. The doors opened. The hall went silent. Hundreds of wolves turned to look at her. Nobles in their finest, warriors still bearing scars from the raid. Common folk who'd never attended a royal ceremony before. All of them watching, judging, waiting to see if she'd falter. She saw Ronan near the front, nodding once. Saw Lady Vex, expression neutral but not hostile. Saw Lord Castor, looking almost proud. And at the far end of the hall, standing on the raised platform where kings were crowned and queens were made, Draven waited. He looked at her like she was the only person in the room. She walked toward him, each step deliberate, refusing to rush or hesitate. The aisle felt endless. The silence was deafening. But she made it, climbed the steps, took her place beside him. Lord Castor stepped forward, holding the ceremonial binding cord, a length of silver silk that would tie their hands together, symbolizing the joining of their lives. We gather to witness the binding of King Draven Ardent and Lyra Vance, he began, voice carrying through the hall. 2 lives becoming one. 2 strengths becoming whole. He wrapped the cord around their joined hands, speaking words that were older than Iron Peak itself. Words about loyalty and trust, and choosing each other every day until death made the choice for them. Lyra barely heard them. She was too focused on Draven's eyes, on the way his thumb traced circles on her palm, on the feeling that this was real and terrifying and exactly right. Do you, King Draven, take this woman as your mate, your equal, your chosen? I do. And do you, Lyra Vance, take this man as your mate, your equal, your chosen? Her voice came out steady. I do. Then by the power vested in me and witnessed by this kingdom, I declare you bound, your lives joined, your fates intertwined. He unwrapped the cord. Draven kissed her, not gentle, not brief, claiming and promising and sealing the vow in front of everyone who'd ever doubted her. The hall erupted in applause. Not universal. Some nobles still looked skeptical, some commoners confused, but genuine. She was queen now. For real. No takebacks. The celebration that followed was chaotic and overwhelming. People she didn't know congratulated her. Nobles who'd ignored her for years suddenly wanted to talk strategy. Musicians played, food flowed, and the entire kingdom seemed determined to drink itself into oblivion. Lyra endured it with the same grim determination she'd used to survive everything else. Near midnight, she slipped away from the chaos, needing air and quiet. She found her way back to the courtyard, to the bench where Draven had first told her to choose herself. She wasn't alone long. Hiding from your own celebration? Ronan appeared from the shadows, cup in hand. Needing a break? She corrected. He sat beside her, silent for a moment. Then, you did good, tonight. The fight with Vex. All of it. Coming from you, that's high praise. Don't let it go to your head, but he smiled when he said it. For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. You're not weak. You're just smart enough to hide your strength until you need it. Is that your way of apologizing for throwing me into a wall? That's my way of saying I respect you. The apology comes later, if ever. She laughed despite herself. Fair enough? He stood, drained his cup. Try not to let the crown crush you. You're better when you're fighting. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the stars and the sound of distant celebration. She stayed there, breathing in the cold night air, letting the reality of what she'd become settle over her. Queen, mate, prime alpha, all the things she'd never dared to dream. There you are. Draven appeared, shedding his formal jacket, looking exhausted and relieved. I've been looking everywhere. Needed air. Understandable, that was... He sat beside her, pulling her close. A lot. That's one word for it. They sat in comfortable silence, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest. Any regrets? He asked quietly. Ask me tomorrow. Will the answer be different? Probably not. She looked up at him. But I reserve the right to panic. Fair. He kissed her forehead. For what it's worth. You were perfect tonight. I was terrified. Same thing. Keep saying that, because it keeps being true. She kissed him, slow and grateful and exhausted. When they broke apart, she felt steadier. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure it out. Together. That's not very specific. I know, but it's honest. And maybe that was enough. Maybe honest was all they needed. They stayed in that courtyard until dawn, talking about nothing and everything, planning for a future that was terrifying and beautiful and entirely theirs. When the sun rose, they walked back to the keep together. King and queen, alpha and prime, two broken pieces that had somehow made each other whole. The kingdom would challenge them. The nobles would scheme, threats would come from inside and out. But they'd face it together, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. 3 months later, Lyra stood in the great hall, watching the spring gathering unfold. She'd learned to wear the crown without flinching, to give orders without doubting, to be queen without losing herself. It wasn't easy. Some days she still felt like she was pretending, playing a role written for someone else. But other days, days when she settled disputes with wisdom she didn't know she had, when she trained with the warriors and held her own, when she looked at Draven and saw partnership instead of power imbalance, those days she felt like maybe she'd finally found where she belonged. You're thinking too much, Draven said, appearing at her side with 2 cups of wine. Occupational hazard. Come with me. I want to show you something. He led her outside, past the courtyard, to the edge of the overlook where they could see the entire valley spread below. Iron Peak glittered in the fading light, smoke rising from chimneys, wolves moving through streets that had been rebuilt stronger than before. See that? Draven pointed to the eastern wall where new fortifications stood. That was your idea. The double reinforcement. It was practical. It was brilliant. He turned her to face him. You've changed this kingdom, Lyra. Made it stronger, better, more than I ever could alone. You're exaggerating. I'm really not. His hands cupped her face. You were never the weak girl they said you were. You were just waiting for your moment. And now? Now you're exactly who you were always meant to be. She kissed him as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in colors that looked like hope. Below, in the kingdom they protected, life continued. Wolves trained and laughed and fought and loved. Children played in streets that were safe because two people had chosen each other when the world said they shouldn't. Lyra pulled back, looking at the kingdom spread before her kingdom now, her people, her responsibility. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was pretending. She felt like she was home. "Ready to go back?" Draven asked. She smiled, taking his hand. "Always." They walked back together, king and queen, toward whatever came next. And Lyra knew, whatever it was, she could handle it. Because she wasn't the girl no one chose anymore. She was the woman who chose herself. And that made all the difference.